is the 8th part in my series on modeling the Chevy Vega interior. In this part I'm going to mark the seams for the UV map, which you've already seen me do with the exterior model. Here I'm going against my own advice and removing extra faces that wouldn't be used in a game. It's strictly an experiment. I'll put them back in if I need them. And in any case, the seats were already mapped, but for some reason some of the edges were marked sharp, which I've never figured out why. I think this may be an older version of Blender exporting in a strange way to the new version of Blender. Here are some extra faces I'm getting rid of again. Again, I'll put these back in if they're needed. And basically what I have to do is mark any seams where otherwise I would have the model looping over on itself, because you can't easily UV map such a model unless it's only in one color. So here I'm finishing up removing those extra faces, but I'll give you the example of this seat here. I've just removed the old seams because I want to do it over from scratch, because as I said, it looks as if the older version of Blender may be incompatible with the newer version. So I start with this series of faces, which will constitute one face of the seat. I may choose to texture it with a photograph. I'll have to see if I can find a suitable one. And I'll try to just have one border. So I remove the cross seams. There I did the seat as well as a separate part. Here's the back. Again, this will require cleanup after I do this, because you see there are some that are still crossed there. I have to remove those. And next I do the sides of the seats. Again, because it's much easier to texture anything if it's just a flat piece and not something that loops over. And as I said, it's useless if it loops over on itself. You can't actually pull that off with any detail. It defeats the purpose of a UV map, really. So, marking the seams on that. I have skipped over quite a lot of detail in this because I only have 10 minutes. So, I decided to get rid of some of the recline in the back seat there as an unrelated fix while I was putting in the seams on it. It seemed unrealistic. Although again, I'd like to see the real measurements, because I am not convinced that I did this accurately. There I'm cleaning up the extra seams. One of the things is that if you select any two vertices that are connected by an edge and you give the command mark seam, you will get these extra seams marked. There's no way to avoid that, so either you have to remove them afterward or do one section of each edge at a time, which can be slower than just doing a string of them. A judgment call basically of how much labor you save by doing it one way or another. Here I'm resizing the seat to make the seat part, the bottom part, longer. Again, I think because this is more realistic. You wouldn't be able to put your feet under the front seat though, so it's kind of an example of sacrificing realism to build a simpler model. If this were an interactive model, of course I would have to leave space under the front seats, because real seats are not designed this way. Here I'm doing the edges of the tray, as I like to call it, top and bottom. A lot of these were already done from the original exterior model, because some of the edges are the old edges, but many of them are not, so I have to complete the edges around. Next is the steering wheel. I need to split the rim in half and then give it some beginning and end section by marking a seam around one of those segments, which, as it happened, I did last in this because I forgot to do it the first time through. I went straight through the splitting it open stage, if you can call it that, like a green bean, and then I went directly to marking the seams on the center spoke of the steering wheel. Oftentimes when you do a UV map or you mark seams, you find you have to do additional things to it because you forgot things. It's very hard to remember everything, actually. So here I'm splitting the ignition switch again, like I did the steering wheel, and I have to also make an edge around the outer face of this, which again is sort of a construct. It's not 100% realistic. It's a compromise. Doing the same thing with the directional lever here. And once I am done doing that, and this is the steering wheel fix I mentioned earlier. So if you don't do this, it's a perpetual loop, so it's never going to work. The computer doesn't know where to end it. And the handbrake, done the same way. You split it like a green bean and then mark the sections at the end. Gear shift is the same thing. Anyway, this housing is more complicated than it looks because, of course, there is the channel for the shifter there, which has to have its seams marked separately from the rest of the housing. The floor and bell housing are deceptively simple, on the other hand, because you can take them together and make them one big rectangle that's all the same color, basically the color of the carpet. The dashboard was a little bit more complicated, especially because I had to fix these old problems with these missing faces around the speedometer. So I had to fix those before I could do the rest of the project. So it involved putting in the faces, making sure the normers were facing the right way, and so on. And I made the bottom part of the dash there a separate section just to make it easier to build the UV map for later. The top of the dashboard is also another completely separate piece, but you can see it's already close to done there. And my intention is to make the instrument clusters a separate piece as well, so that it's easier to put photos of gauges or some such over them. Because I like those to be reasonably detailed, because people expect them to be detailed, you know. And it's also important when you consider I'm thinking of omitting a lot of the knobs. So again, the texture should be accurate enough so that it doesn't have to matter. So it's almost done. In fact, it is done. So thanks for watching.